Mr. Pond Balls, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk. It must be Tuesday night. Let's go live for about an hour and see if we can talk about some pond stuff. So you guys know the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like, share it to your timeline, and you're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and whatever else Leanne comes up with. So I see we have 0 viewers, so this might be a really short night. I don't know, we'll see. And you guys start thinking about some questions. The topic I picked, Leanne texted me. She wanted to put some. There's Bay checking in. Hello, Bay. I'm glad we have one. Bay and his wife. I don't know why she sits here and watches this. Yeah, well, here we go. Hello, Tim Stewart. There's Mark Williams. There's some folks checking in. Ron Krismans from up there in Michigan. Mark Williams, Arkansas. Bay Milton-Berger from Texas. Tim Stewart's from Florida. So, hola. Good to see you guys. I don't know why this thing's telling me 0 viewers. Hello, Todd Austin. Good to see you. So, anyway, the topic I picked, Leanne nudges me pretty much every Tuesday. She says, hey, you going to go live tonight? And I'll say yep or nope or whatever is going to happen. Trying to figure it out. Well, she said, what's your topic tonight? She said, somebody's asking about a topic. Well, I didn't know what it was going to be. I hadn't thought about it. Hello, Vito Barnes from Whitesboro, Texas. Tim, I see your question. I'll get to that here in a minute. I got some thoughts about that. So I said, you know what? Let's just talk about green bananas in the food chain. So I hope you guys are intrigued by that little title, because I kind of tickled myself with it. But those of you that have been around me very much have heard me tell the story about the green bananas. I know Fred Bingman has. There's Fred. Bill Shrum's heard it. I think he's on today. We'll see. But I came across a client. I'd probably been in the fisheries business maybe every bit of 10 years back then. And the pond management business had really not developed into a real viable, thriving business industry yet. And I was able to kind of scratch out a living working with a handful of different clients. And one day I get a phone call from this guy that's out of Houston and had just sold his company and had made a lot of money. And he was in his mid to late 70s, I think 76 if I remember right. And he bought this 1,200 acres out west of Houston. And he hadn't even closed on it yet. And he put a high fence up because he wanted to grow deer. And one of the comments he made to me was, you know, Bob, I spent my entire life building my company, trying to turn it into something really special, and I didn't go to my kids' ball games and the dance recitals and things. And he said, now I got grandkids, so I want to make up for lost time. So I want to do something really special here. Hello, Big Frog, checking in from outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And Tim, I will get to your question here in a minute. But anyway, as I was talking to this guy, he was going to build a lake where it didn't need to be built at the base of a hill with no watershed. Yep, well, thanks there, Bill. I'm kind of glad to be back in my office, to be honest about it. I've been gone a lot. So anyway, I'm visiting with this guy, and I run down to take a look at his place. It's down between Columbus and LaGrange, Texas. He sold it a few years later, sold it like when he was in his early 80s, I think. And as I got to talking to him, he wanted to build about a 9-acre lake shaped like a quarter moon around the base of a hill. And I said, man, there's not enough watershed to fill this lake. I didn't know much about it then, but I had enough sense to know that there wasn't enough watershed that I didn't think that lake would fill up with rain. He said, well, he talked like this. He said, son, don't worry about it. If I'm going to build it, if it don't fill up, we'll just drill a well. Well, by golly, that's what he did. And he had a 750-gallon-a-minute well, and he was able to pump full and keep his lake full back then in the late 80s, early, I guess it's probably like 1990, through there somewhere. I'd been at it about 10 years. And it came time to start talking about stocking it. And he said, now, Sean, listen, I don't want to do like all you biologists do and put in them fingerling fish about that big and wait on them to grow up. He said, son, I don't even buy green bananas, and I'm not sure I'll be here when they get ripe. So can we stock that lake like it's been there for 5 or 6 years? And I said, you know, yeah. I hadn't done it before, but I said, yeah, I don't know why we couldn't do that. It's going to cost a lot of money. He said, son, don't worry about the mule going blind, load the wagon. So there's a lot more to the story, but the statement that he made about green bananas was etched into my brain forever, because, you know, when we've got a lot of folks out there, you know, me included, that go through the drive-thru and you talk to that little box speaker, yep, I'll take a number or whatever, you know, and then we drive around to the window and get it. You know, a lot of people really expect things to happen fast. It's kind of the green banana thing. They don't buy green bananas because they don't want to wait for them to get ripe. Well, what he wanted to do was to replicate in my mind, in fact, something, what would it look like if the lake was 5 years old? So I started calling around, rounding up fish. I got some from private sources. I got some from a ranch that has a bunch of ponds back then where they had way more fish than they had, you know, need for or use for. And so, you know, the guy spent $90,000 on fish. That blew me away, first of all. But those fish, they did not have to move 10 inches to eat. They could just open their mouths and suck, and food would go in it. And I learned a lot about that lake. So what I want to do is compare that concept of green bananas to your food chain. So the way that the food chain works, and I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to turn around and start tackling some of these questions they see popping up. Mark's got something, Tim Stewart's got some things, so we'll hit that here in just a minute. And so what you need to understand is there's these variety of species of fish that play different roles in the food chain. Now, keep in mind the food chain, there's different trophic levels. So like what's going on with Tim Stewart right now, he and I had a phone conversation. His fish were coming to the surface being real lethargic. And he was wondering what in the world was going on. So based on what he told me, the conclusion that I had to come to was that the water quality was deteriorating. So I recommended that he start moving the water. Well, he's got a bottom diffused aeration system, but here's the catch-22 there. If there's a greater nutrient input coming into that lake than what the water can process in a reasonable amount of time, even with aeration systems, toxic and organic waste byproducts start to build up. You know, the most obvious one is when you're walking around the edge of your pond, you kick up some rotting leaves and you smell that rotten egg smell. That's hydrogen sulfide gas. The reason you smell it is the water's releasing it into the atmosphere. Well, if stuff like that stays bound in the water for very long in a high enough volume, it can create some toxicity levels that are always temporary in a pond, but toxic nonetheless. It can cause some real heartache with your fish. It can kill them. And Tim caught his just in time. The recommendation that I made to him was start moving the water in a way that the water could contact the atmosphere more quickly and degas itself, relieve the gases into the air. So where I'm going next is if you've got good, happy water, then the food chain trophic levels start off with nutrients. So whatever nutrients are dissolved into the water or even buried in the pond muck, in the pond mud, those nutrients that are available are going to be utilized by something, whether it's planktonic algae or plankton that feeds on it, microscopic stuff that turns around and feeds zooplankton, which is microscopic animals, which that's the next trophic level. Then the next trophic level is whatever eats those amoebas and parameciums and the zooplankton that are out there in the water, which is going to be little bitty insects and maybe newly hatched fish. So at each level, there's a 10-to-1 conversion rate. It takes 10 pounds of plankton to grow a pound of zooplankton. It takes 10 pounds of zooplankton to grow a pound of small insects and it's tiny fish. It takes 10 pounds of those on and on and on up the food chain. So as we're trying to manage the food chain, we're looking at each one of those trophic levels and trying to figure out what are some things we can do to actually make it better. You know, and one of those things is especially when you're trying to manage for top-end predators like largemouth bass, for example, like our friend Bay Miltonberger is doing. And Bay's got a really fascinating lake in that it's got the vehicles, the mechanism to keep nutrients dissolved in the water column in adequate levels to support a really, really healthy plankton bloom, which in turn, feeds the next trophic level. Part of his plankton bloom is he's got filter feeders, threadfin shad. He's got bottom feeders, carp, gizzard shad. Even though those are fish we don't necessarily always want, if it fits into a bass's mouth, it's part of the food chain. So try to manage your food chain. The easy part is to make sure you have all the ingredients, like largemouth bass eat what? Bluegills. Bluegills are the backbone of the food chain. You got to have bluegills. Red-ear sunfish, good insurance policy. Fathead minnows, no. First 2 years, yes, got to have them. But after that, fathead minnows don't play a role. So know your species. Threadfin shad, in this case, now threadfin shad, the more you study the food chain, the more you got to learn about these individual fish and what are their lifestyles like, what are their life cycles like, what do they eat, how do they spawn, what is their role in your pond. And if you can start to figure that out, then you can manage your food chain. One of the easiest ways to manage a food chain is to feed the fish. Purina Mills makes great fish foods. That MVP product, they've got 9 different particle sizes that can feed everything from fish about this big up to, some 9-10 inch long feed trained largemouth bass, for example. So, managing the food chain is an integral part of the success of a fishery. Now, there's way more to it than that. You guys know that watch this show. Or if you got a pond, you know that. So it's, and always, I preach this every time I talk, pretty much. Happy water. What's next? I hear you guys talking out loud. Bill Shrum's probably got his drone up, shouting from his drone. Habitat. Food chain. Genetics, and a harvest plan. And if you can design your food chain management strategy to be assisted by a harvest plan where the fish play a role in the harvest, then it's easier to perpetuate a food chain. For example, do you have enough big bass to feed on the small bass? Because the small bass are the ones that tend to disrupt the food chain by overeating. So there's you a little bit, there's a 12-minute little dissertation-ish thing about that. All right, so let me back up here, make sure what we got. Here we got Tim Stewart. The bloom color in my pond is changing to slightly more brown. Okay, so when Tim and I talked the other day, and he was a little bit concerned about his fish rising to the surface, which if your fish rise to the surface and they're lethargic, something bad is about to happen. Odds are high. The risk is high that something bad is about to happen. Well, Tim's got a smaller pond down in South Florida, hot, and not excessively hot like in even in central South Texas, because he's got a cool breeze coming off of either the Gulf or the Atlantic Ocean, and so the way he described it, it sounded like there were some kind of natural toxins, whether it's ammonia or nitrites or rapid changes in pH due to photosynthesis and respiration. If your pH is going like this and spiking every day, that's stressful on fish. So that means the alkalinity is low. Check your water chemistry. So the conclusion I came to try to help Tim immediately was get as much, and I didn't say it like this, but I gave him the mechanics as to what he needed to go do. But the gist of that recommendation was get as much of your water volume to contact the atmosphere as you can. Yeah, you're going to lose some evaporation, and the temperature's probably going to go up. But the risks of not doing anything were much, much higher than the risks of those two bad things happening. So he started moving the water. Now when he said, when I said, okay, what color is it? He said, it looks like pea soup. Well, when I think of pea soup, babe, what do you think about when you hear pea soup? Yeah, there was a movie back in the 70s, right? What was it? Yeah, The Exorcist. So when I think pea soup, I'm thinking it's almost lime green. And so when I started asking, no, it's not lime green. He said it's more of a dark green. And then he sent a picture of it, and pictures never do describe the color accurately. So he said it's more of an olive green. Well, now, when he said the bloom color in my pond is changing to slightly more brown, that suggests that a healthy phytoplankton bloom is now being converted to zooplankton food. So what happens typically, and this happens more often in the spring, when these things happen in the summer, and you're checking your visibility, two things you got to do: check your temperature, check your visibility. You do those two things, and you're going to help do your part to keep the water happy. If you know those things, and you know what it means. So his visibility was pretty low, like 12 inches. So as he described it, okay, that's a phytoplankton bloom, where the majority of whatever it is, whether it's planktonic algae or whatever, is rising to the surface to meet the sun. Because some of that stuff can actually move. It's got flagella. Ask my son Cameron what that means. He'll get a chuckle. So will you. But when you've got that kind of a bloom, then it turns around and starts to shift. Here's what I'm going to tell you, Tim. The bloom color in my pond is changing to slightly more brown. That means that it's beginning to spike with more zooplankton. That means that your risk of water chemistry degradation is going down. That means what you did is working really, really well. As a reminder, hashtag Pondboss Magazine, like Big Frog did and like Fred Bingaman did. Hashtag Pondboss Magazine, click like, share your timeline, and you're eligible for a drawing. I think I said hello to Charles Hearing. Okay, Tim Stewart, I believe my pond needs more 3+ pound bass. They ought to be able to easily slurp down 10 to 12 inch walking catfish, and now I've got skinny 8 to 10 inch bluegill. You can pump up. I had told you to cut back on the feed. Actually, I think I told you don't feed for a few days. Now that your water quality sounds like it's getting healthier, you can bump up your feed a little bit. Don't go overboard. You know, I'm going to tell you, don't feed more than 1 pound of feed per acre of water per day right now. Now, even if they clean it up fast, you know, those skinny 8 to 10 inch bluegill, and I know how old your pond is. So those 8 to 10 inch bluegill are not skinny because they're old. They're skinny because they're undernourished. You know, so if you can grow more 3 pound bass in there, then you're going to help yourself. Dr. Mark Williams, I'm so sick of elementous algae, it needs gone, but it's brown and dead, and like you said, it's like mowing a yard. Going to grow, cut, and die. It looks horrible. Is there a chemical to flocculate? Ooh, I scrolled down too far and went off the screen. To flocculate the killed debris via Q-Trine Plus. I want it prettier and cleaner. Any hints? Well, let me tell you what. I got to spend time with Big Frog Wilson and Allison, one of his premier field staff, and watch them go work on a couple of ponds. And one of them had a fair amount of algae, but another one had some film on it. So what they did is they've got a really cool system, which is basically, I'm just going to call it a trash pump, that's portable, that they put in a boat. And it's a 2-inch pump, looks like, and it chokes down like a 1-inch, almost like a 1-inch fire nozzle, almost. It's not that, but it looks like that. So they use the pressure of that pump, and they put it in a boat, get out in the pond, and then they crank up that motor, and then they like to use Aquafix. Look up Aquafix. And they got another company name, but they custom produce microbes for your water. So you typically, what you do is you send in a water sample to those guys. Landon Wyatt, help me out there, Big Frog, if you're watching this. I can't believe it, but Landon's company is escaping me a little bit, but they use a lot of that. So it's basically they use beneficial microbes to help expedite the breakdown of that organic matter, but by breaking the surface tension on that dead algae, with that pump, they're spraying it on top of it, breaking it up, and it sinks. Because when you spray it, actually you're knocking the air out of it, literally, kind of like taking a gut punch. You're giving it a gut punch, and it's pushing the air out of it so all that stuff sinks, and it can break down quicker. Hey, there's John Dyer checking in from the Carolinas. Scott and Leah from near Tulsa. Travis Walker likes green bananas. Mark Dyer lurking before the Weird Al concert. Woo! He's in Nebraska? Hello, Danny Mac. Lots of Dyers. Yep, you're right. Let's see here. Howard Dietrich checking in. Probably, let's see, this is summer. Are you in Florida? Hey, there's Scott Grafzoo. No, I mispronounced that. I've tried it before. Good news is the filamentous algae is pretty much non-existent for the first time at the lake. Bad news is duckweed showed up this year. The lake is 15 acres. What's the best way to keep duckweed in check? Start about 90 days ago. using, you know what, let me do this. I have purposely not stayed totally in tune with the last 10 years worth of innovations and changes in aquatic plant herbicides and things. There's not any kind of biological way to get rid of duckweed. And keep in mind, I've mentioned this before on this show, duckweed, has anybody ever asked you, would you rather have $1 million now or a penny doubled every day for 30 days? Take the penny. Duckweed is the penny. It reproduces about every 48 hours. It goes from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, 16 to 32, bam, 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 bam. And pretty soon your lake's covered up with it. So if you can get it while the numbers are low, it blows with the wind. You can scoop it out depending on how big your lake is. It's a 15-acre lake. Tell you what I want you to do. Go to Aqua Plant. Just look up the word Aqua Plant, which is Texas A&M's aquatic plant website, and look up duckweed. Just search for duckweed, and it's going to let you see which duckweed it is, and then show you the different choices you've got. One of my choices for duckweed has been Floridone. Back in the day, it was Sonar till the patent ran out. Now there's a whole bunch of different ones. Howard District Shiners. Okay, Bill Shrum, we ran out of Purine MVP, and the dealer won't have any in for a week. I bought a 40-pound bag of grain-based fish food to fill in, mainly for catfish. The grandkids love catching them, and the catfish have been the most aggressive feeders. With the warm water temperature, any danger of this bag causing water issues? Here's what I'm going to tell you. I think with all the things you do with your pond, I don't think that's an issue. As a matter of fact, that's all we used to feed. Golly, this until probably 20, actually, you know what? It's only been 20 years that we could really, really get good, affordable, it's hard to say that in the same sentence now, fish meal-based fish food. You know, used to, the only way we could get good fish meal-based fish food was to buy it out of Idaho from trout farms. You know, or a feed company up there, Silver Cup was the name of it. I think they got bought out a few years ago. So, any danger of this bag causing, okay, so the catfish are going to digest that. So let me tell you what's going to happen. When you feed that grain-based fish food, the catfish can fairly efficiently digest it. They're going to digest it like 2 to 2.5 pounds of feed per pound of gain. But then when they poop, insects in the water have a tendency to want to eat that because it still has some nutrients to it. You know, because some of the fish food carbohydrates in that grain-based fish food is not digestible by the fish. So that ends up in the water where something else can eat it. I love Bay Miltonberger. He makes me laugh all the time. Pea soup sucks in any situation. Yeah, you can't add enough ketchup to make it anything but pea soup. All right, Danny Mac swears by bacteria, and he does that. So Danny Mac basically just kind of, I've never been there, but I've seen enough pictures and talked to him enough about it. Basically, he's got a waterfall that comes down into a fairly small pond, say 1/10 of an acre, and then he lifts the water up, pumps it back up the hill to flow over the waterfall and cascade down back into the pond. So he's using that water movement to help cleanse the water, and since he's moving it that much and almost replicating what nature does with a stream, and he's got enough rock there, the rock is a great substrate for these microbes to cling and do their magic as the water flows over it. Hello, Mark Hicks. Good to see you. You know, Vito, that's great. Eating 10 pounds of pea soup would cause me to lose a pound. I'm right there with you, man. I don't even know why it exists. I think people eat it when they're sick, or if they want to be sick. Travis Walker, bluegill are popping here. Got more babies. That's good news. That's especially this time of year. Bluegill, when the water temperature really gets up, some of them do reproduce. I mean, we were wading in the river today. I had the grandkids out here, and I saw a little crater, and I thought, Dad, gum, that looks like a sunfish nest. And right beside it was a big rock, probably, I'm going to say that rock was 20 inches in diameter and pretty jagged. And I'm watching that, what I thought was a nest, and I saw these little spot-tailed shiner river minnows coming in, pecking in the bottom of that nest, trying to eat eat eggs is what it looked like. And all of a sudden, here comes about a 5-inch long-eared sunfish out from under that big rock, bolts into that nest, spears a couple of those minnows to make them go. He didn't catch them, but he hit them to make them leave. So, and I know that water temperature's in the mid-80s. I could tell that because the hair on my ankle was curling up. So, it doesn't surprise me to know that bluegill are spawning somewhere right now. Howard's in Iowa. Howard travels a lot. He's got a cool motorhome and gets to go do some fun stuff in his retirement. Highly active, like we all should be. Tim Stewart, my alkalinity was 120. That's good. pH swing from 7.2 to 8.2. What that tells me right there is that you really did have a dense plankton bloom. Now, the good news is when there's that much photosynthesis, it's less likely that was blue-green algae. Or because blue-green algae is a bacteria that doesn't it does have chlorophyll, but it doesn't photosynthesize nearly as much as some of these single-cell algae plants do that we really like. Visibility increased from 16 to 24, which that happened because you moved the water horizontally and you moved some water, with a trash pump to blow it up in the air. So you were able to recognize you had a problem coming, and you were able to fix it. The fish are still coming to the surface in the afternoon, but they're not nearly as lethargic, and they're chasing schools of gambusia. Well, good. Sounds like they're in much, much better shape. Hello, Virgil Meyer. Virgil's in Iowa, too. Let's see. Howard says, what's the most common reason for threadfin shad not getting established? Too many predators. That's one of them. So that's a great question. That's a really good common practical, common sense question, I'm going to call it. Threadfin shad, here's the way that works most of the time. If there's a fish farmer that raises them, they like to transport them about now, which means they wait for their young of the year to get up to be about an inch and a half long, 1 3/4, then they transport them. If you get into the spring, most of the time they're being caught from a wild source and being transported in the middle of the spawn, which means that when they hit your water, they're going to spawn almost immediately if they've got the right substrate. Threadfin shad love to stick their eggs on grassy substrate, or something they can stick it on, like even some woody type plants. So underwater, like bushy pondweed, American pondweed, grass around the edge of the pond submersed. If they don't have substrate, they don't get established. But the biggest killer that keeps threadfin shad from becoming established is their filter feeders. Threadfin shad don't have a swim bladder. They got to swim 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or they sink to the bottom and fall on their sides. So as they're swimming, they're opening their mouths, gulping in air to breathe, and they got these little bitty, what's called gill rakers, like little fingers on the inside of their gills, which captures anything that's in the water column in the sense of plankton, zooplankton, whatever. They're filtering it from the water column. So if your water is crystal clear, that's essentially sterile for threadfin shad to be able to reproduce and eat. Water, which not so much reproduce, but to be able to eat. So the two most common reasons that threadfin shad don't get established, well, there's a third one. The first two is there's not enough food to support it and to support the population, and there's not enough substrate for them to reproduce. One of the things I'll always remember, Lake Texoma is almost 90,000 acres. Back in, I think it was, when was that? Golly, it had to be like around 1989. We had a horrific freeze that went across the entire nation, and it killed the threadfin shad in Lake Texoma. And the water temperatures got to get below 42 degrees for just a pretty short time, and they died. Well, the threadfin shad were eradicated from that lake. So the next spring, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department went to a nearby power plant lake that had threadfins that made it through the winter because the water was warmer, and they moved 20,000 threadfin shad into that 90,000 acre lake. And about 7 or 8 months later, that lake was populated again with threadfin shad because it had everything they needed. The places to spawn, had the food chain, had the water fertility, and they reproduced like little underwater rabbits, and the babies started having babies within about 90 days. So it doesn't take a lot. You know, as a matter of fact, when Bay and I were talking about his management strategy over the winter, we had not discovered threadfin shad in his lake. And I told him that story, and I'd already told him, you know, let's stock about, in your 100-acre lake, let's see if we can stock about 50,000 of those threadfin shad. And the reason I picked that number was I knew that he had enough bass in that lake and enough other predator fish, gar, crappie, channel catfish, that I knew that they were going to feed on some of those threadfin shad when they hit the water. And I was hoping that if 10,000 of them survived, man, that lake would load up quick, like within 6 weeks or so with baby threadfin shad. Well, during our excursions in March, we found threadfin shad. We didn't find many, but we found several schools, and now that lake, the last few times I've looked at it, and when Bay's down there, he sees little threadfin shad from that big to that big just rolling around the edge of the lake. So the third reason that they don't establish is poor transportation. So they get the wrong bus driver or somebody that doesn't know how to handle threadfin shad, and if they hit the water distressed, their survival rates drop, and I've seen survival rates go to 0. If you plan on trying to haul threadfin shad, don't get greedy. All you need is just 2 pounds more than what that transport tank can hold, and you're going to kill all of them. If you catch them with a cast net, that's pretty hard on them. You need to catch them with a seine. There's a whole lot of things that are so delicate. Let's see what Danny Mac's got going on here. Ooh, there's 30 comments. I need to get rolling here. Hey, let's do a commercial right quick. Pond Boss Magazine, you know what I'm going to say. Here's the newest one. Love the cover. Genetic study. Matter of fact, that's about Bay's Lake. Genetic study. Genetics or environment or both. If you got the greatest genetics on the planet, but you don't have the right environment in which they live, or vice versa, if you got the greatest environment but not the best genetics, well, this article tackles that. So this issue's got a lot of good meat in it, and it's in mailboxes now. $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. Yeah, when's the last time you had a $35 date? Never. And that date didn't last a year. Whoa, Purina Mills. Aquamax lineup of feed. Love the feed. You need to be feeding fish now. Of course, when it gets hot, they're going to eat less. So you need to be paying attention when you're feeding your fish. So watch the consumption. If they're not eating it all within a couple of minutes, back off a little bit. You know, then when the water temperature starts to go down toward the 1st of October, second week of October, something like that, bump it up. Because from October until the water gets so cool that they're actively feeding less or feeding less actively, they're going to try to put on as much weight as they can going into the winter. And the more weight you put on the fish, they're going to store some fat, which is what they metabolize over the winter. If they don't store some fat, then they're going to metabolize flesh. And when they come out of the winter, they got to make that up. So that they're losing active growth time. So fall is really, really important time to feed. Right now, just keep it maintained. Don't overdo the feed. Pick the right feed based on the species of fish you got. You know, Bill was talking about he's got a lot of catfish and he couldn't get MVP, so he bought some grain-based fish food, which is perfectly fine for catfish. So that's a good thing. Texas Owner Products. I love Texas Owner Products. Those guys, customer service is great. Their products are great. Their fish feeders are outstanding. I've got all kinds of war stories about feeders that have been inundated in floods and knocked over and kicked over by cattle, you know, and they're like the old Timex watches. Take a licking, keep on ticking. Texas Hunter Products. Check those guys out. birddogit.com. Just, even if you don't hunt, just look at that business model. It's really interesting. That's my son, Jonathan, and I'm fascinated with the stuff he's coming up with. And what he's done, he's in his 4th year in business, so he's trying to figure out a niche. And one thing I've really dialed in on with him is he really wants to help people. Now, yeah, he wants to make some dollars, but his main thrust is he wants to help people. So, like on the hunting piece, it's kind of like a VRBO Airbnb for hunting, where he works with these ranchers that need to harvest some animals, and then figure out how to curate the right kind of a event, or a hunting trip, to help harvest those animals with the right consumer groups. So he's doing a pretty good job with that. I'm proud of him. Aquadoc. My gosh, I keep getting to be a much bigger fan of Aquadoc the more time I talk to John Big Frog Wilson. You guys check out Aquadoc. If you're in the upper Midwest, they now work in 11 states. They've got 7 offices. I mean, they got offices in 7 states. That's what I'm saying. And they're dialed in, especially the small pond management. I know a lot of us have smaller ponds, but check them out. Go to their website. Their training program is astonishing. They've got over 200 employees now, and they've got what they call Aquadoc U. So one of the big thrusts is they're taking care of their employees and training them, and they're motivating them to go through this Aquadoc U so they can be better stewards, to teach you to be better stewards. So check out Aquadoc. Easy Docks of Texas, David Schneiderman, check him out too. He's always been a sponsor. Matter of fact, David, I got, I don't think I told this to Big Frog, but when we were in Cleveland, we found a neat little cafe on the water on the north side of downtown Cleveland, near the football stadium where the Browns play, and they had on the menu sous vide chicken. Well, I'd heard of that. I read about it from time to time. Who wants to boil chicken in a bag? Well, I was in the mood for chicken, so I ordered it, and oh my gosh, that was the best chicken that I have ever had. So Debbie and I got talking about it, and when we got back, I was telling my daughter Lindsay, you know anything about that? And she went and got a sous vide machine and gave it to us. So my gosh, we've been cooking sous vide chicken here the last 2 or 3 days, and it's really good. I'm not even sure why I'm telling you that, but it was really good. I have no idea why I just told you. I had something where I was going, I lost it. Travis Walker, now I have a half-acre pond. The water's brown, but I see a film on the top, 60 years old, and surrounded by mature trees. Any ideas? Probably, it's either going to be biofilm. It's the wrong time of year for pollen, but it could be. Some different kinds of hardwood trees give off some of their sap drips, and it's kind of oily. And it looks like it could be, it looks like maybe a sheen on top of the water. If it bothers you, and if you've got access to a pump, suck some water out of the pond, squirt it on top of that film, and it'll break it up. Jim Allen, from Kentucky, back from the Adirondacks, looks like. And Jim, I have been up to my elbows late in the last 4 or 5 days with grandkids and helping Debbie with some things. I will dial into some of these emails tomorrow when I get time. Any news on the Purina bass food? Yeah, I had them roped in. They were ready to do it back in the spring, and then they laid off the people that were working on it. So I don't know where we are now. Hello, Buddy Floyd, Como, Mississippi, premier lake and pond builder from over there. Bill Schrum, I raise cattle and their daily consumption between 2% and 2.5% of the body weight in forage per day. What's the ratio for fish? Typically, fish are going to consume 3 to 5% of their body weight per day on average, but a largemouth bass might eat 30% of its body weight if it can swallow it. But it's going to average out to be 3 to 5% of its body weight every day, typically. In the ratio, does it differ for? Yeah, it differs for the different species of fish. Like bluegill, it's going to be a little different. Bass, it's going to be a little different. But typically, 3 to 5% on average per day is what they'll consume. Let's see here. Ron Chrisman is testing the right banana smallmouth bass market this fall. 15-month-old by September, 12 to 14 inches. That's huge. Ron's in Michigan, south of Grand Rapids. He's got some fish. He's trying to figure out how to tap into a marketplace there. Have some green banana. Okay, I have doubts about anyone to be willing to spend money. I don't have doubts at all about that, Ron. I think you're going to, once you're ready to kind of jump into that market with both feet, you're going to have 2 options. You're going to have one wholesale where you can sell them, all of them, to somebody like Herman Brothers, and then they'll go mark them up and sell them at a retail price. Your other choice is to sell them retail and just have nickels and dimes and pennies and, 35 or 40 customers to buy your fish instead of 1 or 2 or 3. But yeah, you could command a higher price. I think what's going to happen is you're going to find out that the demand exceeds the supply, and once you get all your smallmouth bass in a row, so to speak, then you're going to be good. Virgil Meyer, would it be hard to add more yellow perch and smallmouth on my existing fish profile, fall or spring? Do it in the fall. Yet, no, it would not be hard to add more yellow perch. Yellow perch there in Iowa probably reproduce well. Smallmouth bass probably don't. If you want to recruit smallmouth bass, you're going to need to stock them. Hello, Tim Cook. Tim Cook is a really, really an amazing guy. He's one of those guys that's never in the spotlight, but you can't live without him. Tim is a conservation director, I think, for BASS, and part of his job as a volunteer is to help handle the fish properly after a tournament. And he's been everything from a judge and catch and release boats on tournaments to he's just one of these great guys behind the scenes that you never hear about. Well, you just heard about him a little bit. I just scratched the surface of Tim Cook. He also sharpens things. He's pretty sharp himself. Tom Davis, Ohio, good to see Tom. Anna and Adam George. We had our first successful smallmouth spawn in northern Missouri. Transplanted fish from a friend's pond last summer, 2 acres, built 2020. That's great news. That's great news. John Dyer, last week's talk about what is to come with Sarah's Pond was interesting. Overpopulation of bugs seems like a nuisance on the horizon, but also a bounty once she stalks you, and that's absolutely true. And for those of you that did not get to tune in last week, that's one of those handful of shows that touches on a variety of topics from the biology to the mental to the spiritual part of the way ponds work. That would be worth it to go back and at least listen to the middle 30 minutes or something. Brent Ruggieri, I read that for a 2-pound bass needs 45 pounds of food per year to grow to 1 pound. That's not true. A 2-pound bass needs probably 12 to 15 pounds of food in a year to gain 1 pound. So now a 2-pound bass, if it eats 45 pounds of feed, is going to get up to about, I'm going to say 5 pounds, from 2 to 5 pounds on 45 pounds of feed. Once it gets up to 4 or 5 pounds, that number changes because it takes more to maintain its weight at that point. Travis Walker, I actually bought the wrong food from Amazon. It was Purina, but it was made for tilapia and catfish. The bluegill still take it down. Yep, and they like donuts. Because basically that's what it is. The tilapia and catfish food is grain-based, which the bluegill will eat it, but it's kind of like comparing a T-bone steak to donuts. So, and they'll gain a little weight on it. I used to tell people all the time that before these fish foods improved, the fish foods improved about 2004, 2005. That's when Purina really dialed in under the direction of nutritionist Dr. Mark Griffin, who's retired from Purina now. He's the one that really, really grabbed that opportunity, seized it, and did something with it. He's the one that pushed Purina into making these much, much, much better fish foods that they still produce today. So the grain-based fish food, which is for tilapia and catfish, the bluegill will eat it. They're not going to get big on it. The biggest bluegill I ever saw in grain-based fish food was 1.25 pounds to 1.5 pounds. It's not totally true. I saw 5 or 6 2-pound bluegills in the mid-90s, but those were exceptional not because of the fish food, but because of that environment in that pond. So let's see here what Bill's got to say. Sous vide fish would be awesome with the correct spices. You know what? May need to do that next. Which, kind of where I'm going on that deal, we caught, Bay, close your ears. Paula, look away. We caught some walleye with our good friend John Big Frog Wilson week before last, and I may sous vide some of those fish. That'd be kind of fun. Danny Mack is making a comment there. He says 45 pounds of live forage is 90% water. Feed train should be 4.5 pounds. That's about right. So if the part of the reason that conversion rate is 10 to 1 or 15 to 1, depending on the size of fish that's consuming that live food, is because a huge amount of that food product, the food material, is water. You take 10 pounds of fish and you wring it out, you're going to have about 2.5, 3 pounds of something that's not water, that's nutritious. So that's kind of the deal on that. So guys, here we go. We're kind of caught up on the questions. I don't know why my insights aren't working. It says we don't have any viewers, but obviously we have a bunch, so that's good. I'm going to scroll back down and see if I missed anything. Sometimes I miss these questions. I'll scroll past them a little bit faster. Let's see here. You know what? And I did kind of slide back by John's comment a little bit. Last week's talk about what is to come with Sarah's Pond was interesting. Overpopulation of bugs seems like a nuisance is on the horizon, but also a bounty once she stocks it again. Here's a pretty fun story. As I was getting to know Bruce Condello way back, I think I met Bruce first. He joined the Pond Boss forum, pondboss.com. Ask the Boss forum started in 1998. We outgrew our software, so we reconfigured it in 2002. The current forum has been there since 2002. It's the oldest forum on ponds and lakes and fish on the internet. Well, that's where I met Bruce, and I was fascinated with him. I think he was interested in what I do, and we connected the dots. I went to Nebraska, and this was probably the fall of 2005 when I went there. I went there 2 or 3 times. It's kind of a fun story, which, oh hell, I got time. I'll tell you the story. So in November of 2005, our house burned down. And I mean, it was devastating. Lost all Debbie's personal belongings. It was a tragic thing to happen. And she was devastated by it. About 4 or 5 days later, she had a dentist appointment in Sherman, Texas. We lived up near Lake Texoma at that time. So she went to the dentist, and she called me on the way back, and I was out working on lakes or ponds somewhere. And she called me. She says, "Lusk," and she's whimpering a little bit. She says, "I just left the dentist, and he says that I've got to have at least one root canal, and I've got one that can't be filled. He's going to have to pull one of my teeth, and I've got another cavity." And she said, "I just lost my house. I can't lose my pearls too." And I just started laughing. She said, "It's not funny. Stop laughing." I said, "Honey, nobody's going to take your teeth, because there's a lot of things she's proud of, and her teeth is one of them. She's still got all of her teeth." So I said, "You know what? There's a guy that comes on our forum. Let's get a second opinion." So I just emailed Bruce and says, "Hey, would you offer a second opinion about something going on with my wife's teeth?" He said, "Sure." So I had the records forwarded from Sherman to Lincoln, Nebraska. And just less than a week later, I get an email about that long, and started reading it. Man, I had to read it about 4 times. And when I finally figured it out, it was basically there's one tooth that's, he thinks it doesn't have to be extracted, but they're going to have to do some things with it to make it suck back down in the socket where it didn't come out on its own anyway. And then she did need one root canal, another filling could be fixed. And when I got about 2 paragraphs into that, she says, "I want him to do the work." I was like, "God dang it, Debbie's in Lincoln, Nebraska. It's 9 hours. I don't care. Anybody that would offer that kind of an opinion is good." So I made an appointment to take my wife 9 hours to Lincoln, Nebraska to go to the dentist. And that's the way we roll. We still do stuff like that. So as I got to know Bruce, we made it to where we could turn it into a Pond Boss trip. Of course we did. But one of the things that I saw there, this is where I'm going with this, where it relates to what's going to happen with Sarah, is Bruce had one pond that he had only male bluegills in with some hybrid stripers. And those male bluegill were big. And it was probably 2.5 acres. So I took a 100-foot seine with me that I bought in 1984 that I still have. It's laying out there by my fence. Bay saw it. We didn't use it, thank goodness, but he saw it. And we used that seine. It was in January that year, and the air temperature was 55 when we got there, and it went to 17 degrees overnight. So Bruce and I were seining ponds at 17 degrees before ice started forming in January after he'd worked on her teeth, and she was in his cabin recuperating while we're messing with fish. The thing I'll always remember in that pond that had the hybrid stripers and the male bluegills, that's all we caught were a handful of hybrid stripers and bluegills. But as we pulled the seine around, I got to look and I thought, this is pretty daggum interesting. There were tens and thousands of bugs. Everything from mayfly nymphs to dragonfly nymphs to bugs. I had no idea what they were. There were nymphs of nymphs. I've never seen that. I'd never seen that at that point. And so as I started thinking about it, I thought, you know what, this thing's not balanced. You know, it's only got 2 species of fish, and they're all one size class each. That means there's some gaps in there and some voids in the different parts of the food chain and in the different places of habitat in that pond. And sure enough, it started making sense to me. That's why we were starting to see all those bugs, because there wasn't anything in there that were going to eat those bugs. You know, and what was big enough to eat them are the right size. There weren't that many of them. You know, so they were flourishing. What's going to happen with Sarah's Lake now that she's had a massive fish kill and she's contemplating it? The pond's gonna respond. No, you're not making me sleepy. I'm that way naturally. Water. So that first thing that pond will do is the water will cleanse itself. It may not take out all the source nutrients, but it's going to cleanse itself. It's going to reboot its own food chain from the very bottom. And it's going to set the stage for when she does stock it with the right numbers of fish, she's going to see growth rates that she's never seen before. And it's going to happen fast. You know, one of her concerns is her dad's getting up in years, you know, and I mean, so am I. I think her dad's in his mid-70s, and the average lifespan of a male human in America, 76. You know, so she wants to get this, you know, she wants him to be involved in it, which he's really active, and he's involved in it. You know, so I think it's going to happen for a lot faster than she thinks. So there's another fun little story of stuff that's happened to me. Let's see here. All right, let's back up here. Bill, let's see here. Okay, Danny Mac caught that one. Bill Shrum. Largemouth were stocked in June 2023, which is 2 years ago. I'm now seeing 4 different size classes of largemouth bass with the original stockers. That makes sense. And here's why that makes sense. Okay, with the original stockers weighing over 2.5 pounds at 16 inches, most over 100% relative weight, I've heard you say that culling should not take place. Back up. Until the 3rd year. I've kept very good record of the fish caught, so appropriate, no appropriate. How do I discern? Okay, so I see where you're going. All right, how do I determine which size classes to call? The ones that level off growth and begin to lose weight. Those are the size classes that are overeating that part of the food chain. And that's the ones you're going to want to take. So when you're seeing 4 different size classes of largemouth bass, even if that's the originally stocked fish, here's why. Half are boys, half are girls. The girls are going to get bigger, and of those girls, you're going to see about 25 or 30% of those girls excel. I mean, get huge. Another 20-25% are going to be above average. The rest are going to be average or slightly below. So there's 4 size classes right there that you can see. You know, and then you talking about the males. The males are only going to, by now, you know, in 2 years, if they're 3/4 of a pound, that's pretty big for a male. You know, and you may end up with a few males that are knocking on the door of 2 pounds in a pond that size, but I doubt it. You know, so I probably am going to go to bed after this. No, I don't know. I'm not that old yet. I got grandkids right there being really quiet, watching a movie. Call the size classes of fish that are losing weight. I need to do one more commercial before I move on down to these other things. The Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology, I think we've now got 6 people signed up. It's going to be October 23, 24, 25, and we got a really cool highlight coming up. John Dyer is coming. Leanne signed him up. We're going to get to go evaluate Jimmy Houston's personal private lakes. And if that doesn't charge you up, I don't know what will, because Jimmy Houston is one of the most amazing bass anglers. You know, one of the old heads. One of the guys been around forever, outstanding human, strong Christian, evangelical about it too, and just a personality, you know, and he knows a lot about fisheries management. So it's going to be interesting to have him in an electrofishing boat and see what's going on. But I'm expecting there to be a pretty big demand. The first 8 people that sign up and pay, you got a spot with no upcharges, which means you're going to be staying at West Haven Ranch. And if you look on the Palm Moss Facebook page further down here, you'll see a flyer about it. It's $1,500. That's all in, 2.5 days of instruction, hands-on. And I promise you this, you're going to make new lifelong friends because you have common interests. We're going to limit it to 20 people, which I don't know that we'll get 20, but I'm shooting for 20. After the first 8 sign up, then we'll book hotel rooms at small towns not far from the ranch. You'll be upcharged for that. Matter of fact, you'll pay your hotel bill to the hotel itself. But just info@palmmoss.com. Scroll down on the Facebook page here, and you'll see that flyer and see what we're doing there. And if you have questions, ring my number or message me here. Message me Facebook. You know, message me on Facebook. Message me at info@palmmoss.com. For your information, let's see back up. Travis Walker, which food is best to grow the bluegill for bass? Not looking for trophies, but 2 to 3 pound bass. Aquamax MVP. You know, it costs considerably more than the grain-based fish foods, but it's much more efficient. So your actual cost per pound of bluegill, I think I did the math on it, was like around $1 a pound is your gain cost, where it's going to be probably 90 cents a pound with the grain-based fish foods. You know, so it's not too far apart. I'd be looking at Aquamax MVP because the reason not only does it grow bigger bluegill, it improves their ability to reproduce because it's better nutrition. It means they can develop better eggs, better milk, you know, better body condition. So that's the way that works. Hello, Chris Blood. I got to talk about Texas Hunter products, and Chris is one of my longtime friends. Hey, man, I'm coming to San Antonio for that Bass 101 or whatever it is that the American Fisheries Society's putting on. Man, I'd love to connect the dots with you. I think I get there. I don't know if I get there on the 9th or the 10th, and then I cut out on the 14th. But if we could spend a little time together, that'd be cool. I'll hunt you down, and we'll talk about it. Maybe swing by Texas Hunter and see what's going on. Mark Hicks, I know that I can't make it to the pondology class this October, but do you have any places selected for the next year yet? I want to plan ahead. Yep, we're going to do one in May. So I'm not sure what dates yet, but we will set that up in the fall. All right, there's R.E. Thompson checking in from Mississippi. R.E., I haven't had I know you sent an email, but I have been wrapped up with grandkids and family stuff the last few days, so I'll tackle the emails tomorrow. I'm getting kind of behind on emails. I'm glad you were able to get back. Yeah, R.E., you know, he's amazing. The guy rebuilds engines. He rebuilt a lawnmower. He helps people going through recovery. He's got a ministry. He rides his motorcycle, loves to fish, manages ponds. And R.E., you're like 132 years old. No, I know you're in your upper 80s. Jeremy Day, sorry I'm late. Thanks for making me famous, dude. You've earned that on your own. Okay, let's see. Hope Bob addresses this. Aquadoc, there's our buddy John. If Millicent is floating is not necessarily okay. Oh, I must have missed something from Howard. Let me back up there. How's the book coming, John Dyer? I'm close. It's at the proofreader. I'm waiting on the cartoonist. Then I got to pick out a few pictures, write some of the small things, and it's done. I'm hoping to have it ready to go. Hoping for it to does Tennessee play Alabama that weekend? How in the world would I know that? I don't know. You can listen to it on the radio. Do bass ever get feed trained just by feeding, or does it have to happen on purpose? Some bass will train to feed because they get conditioned to eating the fish that eat the feed, and some of them will condition, but it's a small percentage. I'm going to see if I can back up and find Howard's question that I'm missing here somewhere, unless I addressed it. Okay, Howard, let me see. Oh, I'm missing it somewhere. Bear with me. I know I'm a little dead air. Okay, the last thing I saw from Howard was the Threadfin Shad question. Let me scroll back down and see if I missed it Sometimes I miss these things. I don't see them until I go back and look again. Let's see here. Oh, 4-year-old. Oh, I see. FYI, filamentous algae that's floating is not necessarily dead. Oh, okay, let me address that. That's true. One thing we got to know about filamentous algae, though, Howard, is that it's volatile. It grows fast, it dies fast, it decomposes fast, then the next cycle goes. So it's almost like it's a rolling growth pattern where that stuff is growing all the time. When you look at the floating mats on top of the water, if you see, depending on the species of filamentous algae, I'm going to take it in another direction here in a minute, you will see different colors, different variations of green. It might be yellow, it might be brownish yellow, it might be lime green, it might be olive green. Most of the time when you see that stuff is dead, and it's going through different. Some of it's been dead longer than others. Some places. However, there are some species of algae, Lyngbya being one of them, where the floating mats, this one in the Lyngbya case, Lyngbya, Lyngbya, that can be floating mats of living algae that is absolutely insane to try to get rid of. So yes, that's a good qualifying statement. So here we are, 8:31. Been a fast go around. Alabama plays the Gamecocks that weekend. Bait's pretty damn quick on the trigger. Is it normal for water, Jeremy Day, is it normal for water to get clearer through the summer? Yes, that's normal, and I would hope that it would. So what happens is the plankton bloom runs out of food, and the water clarity increases. So that's what we hope to happen, and that's what I think is probably happening with Tim Stewart's pond over there in Florida. Maybe the bloom is dying, the bloom is running out of food. So the zooplankton have fed on the phytoplankton, they're running out of food. When something runs out of food, it starves. So that's what it is. So hey guys, that's a very lively hour. Great questions. Thanks for keeping me sharp. I'm glad to be able to hang out with you guys and spend some good quality Tuesday night time. And I'm not sure where I'll be next weekend. What's next Tuesday? Let's see, this is the 5th, 7th. So I'll be in San Antonio. So I don't know if I'll be able to broadcast then. If so, I'll do it from the hotel. So rock and roll. Yep, Jeremy, dude, you're learning. Look at you, learn. So guys, once again, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. And tell people about the Institute of Higher Pondology. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Yep, there we go. 3 more. Bay wants 3 more hours. That's hilarious. Oh, man, Vito sent some stars. Somebody did. Yeah, Vito, attaboy. I'm starting to learn how stars work, even though you tried to teach me about 4 years ago. All right, guys, adios for now. See you next Tuesday from the hotel, unless I get drug into something. The date's October 23 through 25 for the Institute of Higher Pondology. Adios for now.